Morning Blues, hope you're doing really well on this Friday. It's a good morning because it's Friday, but it's also a better morning because Chelsea are heading to Wroclaw. Yet another European final for this wonderful club, and Chelsea one step away from achieving the thing I think most of us expected them to 12 months ago now, when of course Man United won that FA Cup and we were demoted from the Europa League to the Conference League. Going to be giving you my thoughts on last night's game against Djurgarden. It was a very strange occasion to be inside Stamford Bridge for several reasons. Firstly, because of, and it's probably the most notable thing about the game, the number of Djurgarden fans who have made it into the Chelsea end. I do have quite a bit to say about that because I think it is a serious thing. And even just before recording this, the Supporters Trust have called for sort of evidence from fans, clearly to put something towards the club, because it was such a farce, really, and kind of how it's been actually a trend in recent games, not just this one. So we'll talk about that. Obviously, the inclusion of so many academy players a real positive, not only from last night, but across the course of this competition by Enzo Maresca. And of course, Chelsea now one step away from lifting their first piece of silverware in the Clear Lake Bowley era. So please like, subscribe, all of that good stuff if you want the latest Chelsea content. We're obviously going to be looking ahead to the Newcastle game on Sunday, which is huge for Chelsea in the race for Champions League qualification, plus transfer news, general news, previews, reviews, the Conference League final in Wroclaw, and then heading towards the Club World Cup over the summer. Please like, subscribe, get involved in the comments down below and give me your thoughts about all things Chelsea. So the lineup that Enzo Maresca put out was heavily rotated. It, for me, felt like he very much had kind of two directions, right? Do you go strong, try and maintain the match sharpness of key players, but then you do run the risk of injury, fatigue ahead of that Newcastle game, or you heavily rotate? There is a risk of kind of a fragmented, weird team, and then if, say, Djurgarden get an early goal and things start to look a little bit dicey, what happens then? I think because the opposition was so poor, and actually Chelsea had gained such an advantage in the first leg, that, you know, he chose right, because obviously that Newcastle game is huge. Chelsea had done the hard yards in the first leg to gain themselves a 3-goal advantage. It was a square pegs in round holes kind of team. You had Marc Cucurella, a left back, and Reece James, a right back, in central midfield. We had Josh Achimpong over on the left. We had Reggie Walsh, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall off the right. I mean, it was a strange team. However, it's not like it was without some merit or some positives. I think the biggest thing was obviously, and the most notable thing for that lineup, was the start for Reggie Walsh. His first start at 16 years old. He gets his debut away from home last week, starts. And I credited Enzo Maresca for even giving him that sub. I think to start him a week later is really great to see. I think as a 16-year-old, obviously, like, you don't want to be too harsh, and, you know, it was just a great opportunity for him. But I have to say, there were Billy Gilmore vibes. I'm not the only one who said this, but even just a moment watching him from my seat at the bridge, I like the way how he seems pretty calm, pretty confident, composed on the ball. There were times maybe he could have done a little bit more daring things on the ball, but listen, for a guy who probably didn't expect to be in this position a couple of weeks ago, it's a big moment for him personally, and to get that significant number of minutes in a European semi-final inside Stamford Bridge, despite the circumstances, despite all the caveats, for him, a big moment, and hopefully can lead to more opportunities in the Chelsea first team in the future. And it wasn't just him. We saw Antwi later in the game. We saw Mecca come on later in the game. That's been a real positive thing about this competition, and was one of my hopes when we were in this competition. Even the Europa League, I think it would have been a similar case, but probably more so in this one. The extent to which Enzo Maresca has given so many debuts, so much minutes to the likes of Josh Achimpong, obviously a bit more developed, and Tyreek George, who are now kind of in and around the first team, but so many names we've seen for the first time. Raksaki, Harrison Campbell, Mecca, who we saw last night, Antwi. There have been so many names across the course of the season who have gained some form of minute starts, and that has been a real positive, because you can dismiss it, but I think for the academy, you know, for players who, you know, for them, they really want to break into the first team. They really want to make that step. They want to be where Trevor Chalobah is. They want to be where Reece James is. They even want to be where Tyreek George is in the upcoming years. That is a real positive, because obviously for resting key players, in the midst of the Premier League games, but also looking towards your academy, looking towards internal solutions and giving the next generation a chance to get senior minutes. I don't know how you flip that around and say that's a cynical thing, a negative thing. That is a positive from where I'm standing. So that is a really good thing. And I think for someone like Josh Achimpong, who I've watched over the course of the season, been consistently impressed by him, the way he's moved from centre back to right back to left back last night to central midfield. For me, someone you've got to be developing, someone you've got to be giving further minutes to, really, I think has to be upgraded from just a really fringe kind of academy player who gets nice minutes to one that you could look on as kind of a good backup option at right back, could play in central midfield, could even be in that centre-back conversation. That in itself is a win from this competition, because if Chelsea were, say, in the Champions League, we may not have seen Josh Achimpong. Obviously, I prefer Chelsea to be in the Champions League, but just in the context of, seeing an academy player, getting that opportunity and seeing what he can do, obviously, with all of these games, for all of these players, no matter where they rank, what their age is, there has been throughout the entirety of this competition a caveat. And the caveat is Chelsea are so heavily weighted in this competition compared to everyone else. They're expected to win the games. I've referred to it before. It feels a lot like kind of England Euros and World Cup qualifiers where you're facing Albania and, you're expected to win. If you don't win confidently and kind of convincingly, people are going to have some concerns. It's kind of a no-win situation. Literally all the way up to the final, Chelsea have been heavy favourites. They've won games by 2 or 3 goals. It kind of feels like at times, no matter what 11 Maresca puts out, no matter what problems are going on around Chelsea in the Premier League form, kind of in terms of player performances and fears people have about the season, Chelsea still end up winning and still end up getting through because their quality is so much more significant, so much more in the elite bracket. And, that's why Chelsea are where they are. They will face a sterner test, obviously, against Real Betis, and my anticipation is it will be the strongest lineup we have seen from Enzo Maresca in this competition, and I think everyone will agree to that because it's the last game of the season. Chelsea are within touching distance of lifting yet another European trophy, whilst Arsenal, claim to be the better team but are going nowhere near another European trophy. So, that is something that, you have to contend with and when analysing this season, because it has been weird covering these games where you go from a Thursday game that feels kind of low stakes where Chelsea have convincingly or comfortably won, but it's hard to judge how serious that performance is in comparison to what you face in the Premier League. But listen, for last night, for what we wanted that game to be, you rest the most players, the key players, the Moises Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Cole Palmer, Noni Madueke, and you get them ready for Sunday against Newcastle, which is a huge game. So I don't think, for my frustrations, that it was not the most entertaining spectacle. It was a very, very forgettable game. But for the youngsters who gained minutes, for the rests that key players needed, it was positive. And of course, on top of all that, Chelsea are going to Wroclaw, which is obviously the ambition of the season, and Chelsea have now got there. They now need to lift that trophy. Before wrapping up, I do want to talk about the other key part of this game, and it is a negative, and it's to do with away supporters getting literally all around the bridge somehow. And this is not just a problem from last night, it's been an increasing problem I've seen in parts. Last night was an extreme. I noticed literally from the moment we got into the ground, you've obviously got the away end, but then it became pretty clear in the first 10 minutes that there were sections of Djurgarden fans in a director's box. There were sections of Djurgarden fans in the West Stand upper. There were some in the West Stand lower. There are apparently problems in the not only West View concourse, but also apparently the West Stand lower concourse. I've heard that. There were some in the Matthew Harding lower. There was definitely ones behind us in the East upper where my season ticket seats are. And it's just a farce, really. It really is that, at this stage of the competition, for a club as big as Chelsea, for this to happen. Chelsea and football at this level, we'd like to be in a scenario where everyone can go to the game and, there isn't the threat of, violence, of hostility. But unfortunately, that's why you have, lines of, segregation in terms of where the home and away end are. That's just the way football works. We'd like it to be more friendlier. That's just not the way it is, especially in the men's game, right? That's clear. And it's a danger. It's a danger to allow and to be put in a situation where you have sections of away fans, making it very clear they're away fans, inside areas of the ground where I did see, in front of my own eyes, fights break out, especially in the Matthew Harding lower. And the danger that only causes to those people involved, but also to the rest of the people, because it's congested, it's, crammed in some of these areas inside Stamford Bridge. And it's just unacceptable. Whatever you want to blame, whether it's people, selling tickets to away fans, having no care about that, or, however this scenario came in, the club have to hold responsibility, because it's a farce, really. It's not good enough. And I think that, it's something that I have noticed more and more in recent years, especially in recent games. Legia Warsaw, I was in the Matthew Harding lower. There were literally Warsaw fans that walked past me at the full-time whistle to ask for the shirt of the Warsaw goalkeeper. There were some on the other side of the Matthew Harding lower. There were ones literally across the ground. And that was a game with a heavy police presence as well. On Sunday against Liverpool, there was a Liverpool fan quite obviously near me. He wasn't wearing Liverpool colours, but he made it pretty clear who he was supporting. And there were some other fans, Liverpool fans he clearly knew, a little bit further down in the East Stand upper, when Virgil van Dijk scored the goal. Now, we laughed and joked about it with him in the end. But listen, that's not the approach everyone's going to take. And it just feels like more and more of a problem. I'm interested, if you're not a Chelsea fan and you're a fan of another Premier League club and you go to games, maybe this may just be a Chelsea problem, but it seems to be a problem in terms of touting, in terms of tickets getting into the hands of people who, shouldn't be in the home end if they're just supporting the opposition team. We've talked about vivid seats this season and kind of the whole ticketing problem. It has been a real issue. I think last night was to another extent. And I hope that it goes, it wasn't that disastrous, but things flared up. And, it signals that there is a problem, because I've never seen it like this before, right? And given we now live in an age of, advanced technology, cameras everywhere, we're moving to digital ticketing next season at the Bridge with Ticketmaster apparently taking things over. It's something that seriously needs to be rectified, because you're putting people in danger. I'm not about sanitizing the game, but you can't sit here and tell me that, especially for young kids going to the game, for women, for just innocent people who just want to turn up, watch their team play football and support them, and are not really interested in getting into a fight and kind of being in the midst of confrontation with literally an opposition fan right near them. In recent years, I literally saw, it was the Arsenal game in 2023, I literally saw an Arsenal fan in a full Arsenal tracksuit in the Matthew Harding lower. How is that person even getting towards and close to the entrance of the Matthew Harding lower? What is going on? It's a complete failure. That is undeniably just incompetence. And it's not about me, getting my axe out, grinding my axe against the club because it's an easy opportunity to. It's a safety problem, and it's something that I think everyone, no matter where you stand and where you sit, feel like, that probably shouldn't be happening. It's probably a nice spectacle if you're just from a distance watching on social media these clips, but they're not clips you want to see, and they're not things that I want to see get increased. Football is not a casual entertainment event. It's not supposed to be, and it isn't the way it's stewarded, the way it's policed, right? It's not like this. But it shouldn't be the case where this is not a tennis match where I turn up, I'm a fan of Novak Djokovic, you're a fan of Roger Federer, and we sit next to each other and we shake hands at the end, because there's not that tribalism. It's not the same as that, and that's what I think the club really need to get a hold of, and really need to contend with how this even happened, because it can't be happening again, and maybe in another scenario could have led to even more problems. So I needed to say my piece about that. It's not about going, oh, let's crap on Chelsea. It's about just obvious flaws and obvious problems that just shouldn't be happening at this level. It really shouldn't. So I think it's a big enough problem that the CST is putting out stuff. The club themselves felt the need to put out a statement because it was that bleedingly obvious. So if you were at the game, if you experienced some things, let me know in the comments below, or contact the CST, who were asking people to submit evidence if they had any problems or complaints about it. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Have a great rest of your Friday, and I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.